welcome everybody, and wonderful response. Thank you so much for coming out for this. Um, I know many of you. For those that I don't know, I'm Jeff O'Keefe. I'm the executive director of Zen Peacemakers, and this is our Peacemaker Circle format. We try to do this once a week. Some weeks we've done it. We've done a couple of sessions. And many of you know, and many of you have heard me say this over and over again, but I'll keep doing it. We really try to move around the perimeter of the various points of interest or focus or activity for Zen peacemakers. So this could be war and peace. It could be food insecurity, racism, gender issues, imprisoned people, refugees, any number of topics. So that's what we're doing here today. And as you all know, and as some of you have hear me say each one of these times, I'm dedicated to keeping everything we do free, other than our in-person bearing witness retreats and street retreats. So all these programs we do for free. And at the same time, we can very definitely use your support. So if you have the means and are so inclined, and if you find some value, please go to the website and help us out a little bit if you can. This is a super easy introduction. I'm delighted to welcome my friend and Dharma brother, Sean Murphy Sensei. And Tetsudo is a Zen teacher, an educator, a teacher at Northern New Mexico State University, I believe.
University of New Mexico in Taos.
University of New Mexico. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for that. And is the director of Sage Institute as well, and teaches mindfulness and meditation in a probably a less Zen context, I would imagine. And he's been our guest once before with a completely different topic. So I really like Tetsudo, that we can go back to you for kind of a revolving slate of topics. Mm-hmm. And we're going to be here for 90 minutes. There will be time for questions and conversation. So make notes if something comes up, and we'd love to have you be engaged. And Tetsudo, I'm going to highlight you so that it records that way. But if that's distracting, you can always click your gallery view and go back. Right. So with that, I'm going to mute myself. Thank you all once again for being here, and hand it over to my friend Tetsudo. Thank you. Let's have a good time today.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Well, I'm going to go back to my gallery view, so I'm not just looking at myself. You all will notice Post-it notes up here. This is it's an outline for my next book, and my wife is using the room that I usually do recordings and presentations from. So I'm in my office, and you get to see my one of my organizational methods for working on books. I want to begin with a Gary Snyder quote from my book, One Bird, One Stone. As many of you know, Gary Snyder, maybe all of you know, is a well-known poet, and Zen, longtime Zen practitioner, but has also been very involved in social action. And here's a quote from him: "The mercy of the West has been social revolution. The mercy of the East has been individual insight into the basic self. We need both." He actually says basic self / void. Basic self, no self. And I certainly believe in difficult times that we need both. We need practice to keep ourselves in balance, and then we need to do what we can to help the greater good. So today I want to do, after a little bit of introductory talk, I want to do a practice with you that's about centering and grounding. and something I really want to share with you. And then I want to share some uh, words from right after 9/11. I was Many of you who I've talked to before will know that I practiced for many years with Daido Roshi at Zen Mountain Monastery, and I would come and go a lot. I live in Taos, New Mexico, but I spent a lot of periods in residency, and I was there right after 9/11, and so I was able to see firsthand how Daido and his first Dharma successor, Myotai Sensei, dealt with this issue in their Sangha. They're only 90 miles from the city, and many of their Sangha members were just directly uh, impacted by the events of 9/11. And they also had a city center that was uh, very close to the World Trade Centers. And so they had some uh, quite inspiring words that came out of their dialogues with their Sangha at that time that I want to share. And if we have time, I may do a second practice with you. But I just want to begin by saying this practice was made for tough times. Those of us who practice know this, but certain historical details I didn't know for years and years and years after I'd begun practice. So one is that the last years of the Buddha, the historical Buddha, were very difficult. The king who had been a great patron to him, Bimbisara, King Bimbisara, was actually overthrown by his own son, and his son was, I'm going to butcher this name, Ajatasattu, so, Atajasatsu, something like that. Um, anyway, he overthrew and imprisoned his father and took over the kingdom and proceeded to want to wage war on the land of the Shakyas, to take over the land of the Shakyas, which is the Buddha's homeland. And it is said that as the armies assembled and began to walk down the road, march down the road towards the land of the Shakyas, it said that the Buddha sat in the middle of the road, and the army, out of great respect for the Buddha, saw him sitting in meditation and turned back. But then, of course, they came back a second time, and the Buddha sat in the road a second time, and they turned back. And the Buddha sat in the road a third time, and they turned back. And then they came again, and at that point, he stood aside because he saw that there was nothing that he could do ultimately to stop them. Um, and I doubt that the Buddha was unaffected by these events. I doubt that he was just completely in serenity as his homeland was invaded by this army uh, the descendants of the king who'd been his great patron. It must have been tremendously upsetting. And in addition to that, I had not realized for a long time that the golden age of Zen, in starting in the Tang Dynasty, and then in the 10th century, the Tang Dynasty fell, and there was this period called the Five Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms, which were where a number of dynasties were established and fell in quick succession. And so there was, during the golden age of Zen, there were many, many times of great turmoil and warfare and famine. And in fact, in the mid to late 8th century, which is right in the middle of things as far as Zen's concerned, it said by that point about 2/3 of the Chinese population had died between famine, warfare, etc. So we may think of those teachers sitting in perfect serenity and harmony, but I doubt that that was always the case. So but our practice can give us great strength to weather uh, difficult and dark times, and we're certainly in one now in both our nation and in the world. The monasteries, by the way, were not islands that were separate from all the tumult that was going on. This was not a time where they could protest actively any more than people could in the time of the Buddha. You know, stand by as the army came down to take over the Shakyas, and they couldn't stand out there with their picket signs saying "No war." Right? It wasn't that kind of time. Um, but the monasteries did take in people, and they did feed the populace, and at times, and they took in orphans, and as well as abandoned cats and dogs, and so we have this picture of these monasteries being very serene places, but actually, from what I understand, the a lot of the times the place underneath the sitting halls, which was a kind of basement, was where they kept all the cats and dogs. And as you can imagine, if you just had a bunch of cats and dogs down there breeding and all trying to eat and trying to coexist, there's going to be a lot of noise and squabbles, and that's all going to be going on under the floor while the monks are trying to sit. So sitting with difficulty is part of our practice. Learning to sit with difficulty is part of our practice. In the meditation, I direct a meditation leader program, which is uh, my addition to the current mindfulness movement. And we train experienced practitioners to be able to uh, uh, to have basic meditation techniques to share with others. Learn basic meditation techniques to share with others. It's a 300-hour program. It's kind of similar to the program that yoga teachers go through to become certified. The programs and like your average yoga teacher, we're not training people to be spiritual teachers. That's a whole different thing. But just to share the basic practices of meditation more widely, because there's a real need for that, and that's through my Sage Institute nonprofit. And we've come to make a very big emphasis on social action. Everybody who goes through that program has to do a social action project, and we have a couple of modules on diversity, inclusivity, um, equity, and we look at racism and other social problems quite deeply. And we've also done programs for activists, and that's one of my big goals is to provide meditation training for activists so that they don't burn out or become consumed by anger. Some of you may know, I must have mentioned it before here, that I walked across the country with a group called the Great Peace March in 1986. It was a group of, it ended up with approximately 600 activists as the core group. We walked 3,000 miles from Los Angeles to New York and then down the coast to Washington as a demonstration for peace. It took us 9 months. But I really saw firsthand how activism can go awry. There was kind of a subgroup on the Great Peace March who called themselves the anarchists, and they all camped together, and they had their own little camp. It was a group of about 50 people, and whatever the governing body of the Great Peace March, whenever they would make a decision, the uh, the anarchist camp would angrily protest against the the Great Peace March uh, uh, governing body. So they were so rooted in their protest stance that they even protested against we who were protesting. So um, so I'm sure a lot of you have seen this issue that people can get stuck in that oppositional, conflict oriented stance, and also can be sometimes just eaten up by anger, and sometimes just burn out. So I want to begin by just sharing a practice here. Um, I don't know, it'll take us about maybe 10 to 15 minutes. So please make yourselves comfortable. It's like basically we'll be doing a guided meditation. And I suspect most or maybe all of you have a practice, a meditation practice, or do zazen. And many or most of you will probably have worked with the hara, that area below the navel where we're often instructed in Zen to try to place our attention. Um, I want to share a practice that comes from Qigong. It's a Taoist practice, as I'm sure many of you also recognize that when Buddhism came to China, it joined up with Taoism. So I sometimes say that Zen practice is two-thirds Buddhism and a third Taoism. So the emphasis on the hara, on this center of gravity point below the navel, actually comes from Taoism. And there are Taoist techniques that make it easier and more precise to connect with that point. I wonder, I can see some of you on the screen. How many people have worked with the hara and found it difficult at times to bring your attention there? Yeah, many people tend to find it difficult. This is a way of very precisely finding the center point of it and also working with the breath. Um, the title of my talk was How to Stay Centered, Grounded, and Sane. This is a very centering and grounding practice. So when you find yourself in a complex situation, when you find yourself thrown off center, this is a great practice to work with. So I'll invite you first to just drop into the breath as we're accustomed to doing. I'd like you to particularly focus upon feeling the breath in the body. What I mean is the body below the head. Just letting ourselves sink into the breath physically, and whatever place that the sensation of breath feels prominent, we can just start there. Some of us may find it's in the heart region. Some of us may find the solar plexus. Some of us may be used to working with the hara, which is roughly a couple inches below the navel in the center of the body, but we're going to get more precise about that. And let's just sit for a minute or two, just centering ourselves in the physical sensation of breath. One of the things you may have noticed with working towards letting the attention settle in the hara, in the Chinese, in Taoism, it's called the Dantian, but it's also our physical center of gravity. So anyone who does balance sports or horseback riding or dances probably is familiar with that center of gravity. But we can't push our minds down there. I advocate kind of letting gravity draw us down towards that point, draw our attention down. If we just center our attention on the breath where it feels natural and just allow, as we relax into the practice, it's really as though gravity or the attractive power of the hara, which actually has a certain pull to it, just slowly draws down, so we're not trying to bring the attention down through will. We're just allowing it to drop deeper and deeper into the body. So we're following the breath, but of course the breath doesn't go down into the belly. Nonetheless, relaxing the belly and centering our attention there, there's plenty to feel. The diaphragm drops more deeply when we relax the belly. And so the lungs can fill more easily. When I first learned about focusing on the hara, it was more or less just in that region in the center of the body, a few inches below the navel. But there's a rather precise method that comes from Qigong that allows us to find more precisely what that point is. And the center of it is meant to be about the size of a pea. So the way this works is I'm going to ask you to take 3 fingers and to put them vertically right below your navel and press lightly into your abdomen. And you'll find that one of those points under one of the fingertips is a little more sensitive than the others. And that's a particular acupuncture point. Some of you may know that. And I want you to mentally draw a line back from there, from that more sensitive point, to the center of the body. Then I'm going to ask you to tighten up the lowest part of the abdomen, the perineum. Same muscle we use if we're trying not to pee, if we're trying to stop the flow of urine. If you tighten up that muscle, and from the center of that point of tightening, draw a line up from there. I know this is rather nerdy and precise, but the point where those 2 lines intersect is pretty close to that center point of the hara, or dantian. And see if you can bring your attention to that point. People feel it in different ways. There's a palpable feeling to it, or for many of us, there is. And if you work with it, you'll find a palpable feeling. Sometimes it's a warmth, a heat. Sometimes it feels like a kind of weight, or there may be kind of a magnetic feeling. If you can find that feeling in that point of intersection between the 2 lines, we're going to get yet a little bit more precise. We're going to first move the mind a little to the left and a little to the right, and try and center ourselves right where that sensation feels the strongest. If you're not feeling it, it's okay. Approximation will do. But if you can feel that sensation, it's fairly subtle. But if you move back and forth a little, you'll find the point where that sensation feels strongest. Now we're going to do the same thing back to front. Move it forward and back. Move the mind forward and back to see if you can, again, find the strongest sensation in that region. Many people find it's a little further back than was first thought, a little further back towards the spine. And then finally, we move the mind up and down. The same thing. See if we can find between those 3 dimensions the best approximation we can find of the center of that point. And that's meant to be the very center of the hara or dantian. One thing you may notice about that point is it has a subtle attractive energy. Once we become clearly aware of it, again, if you're not really able to connect with it, approximation will do. But if you're finding it quite palpable, see if you can notice the attractive quality it has. It wants to draw our attention toward it. Once we've found that point, there's a little bit more to do. So on the inhale, let's see if we can feel the whole abdomen, lower abdomen, around that point expanding in all directions. So it's not just that the belly's going out, but the sides are also expanding on the inhale and the lower back area. In fact, it's basically a 360-degree expansion like a soccer ball, as though we were inflating a soccer ball from that point with each inhale. So that was the point of inflation. Drawing the breath through that point into the 360-degree soccer ball dimension of the lower abdomen. And on the exhale, of course, we lose some of that expansion, but can we allow some of it to stay? So just like if we were blowing up a balloon, when we are blowing in, it expands, but when we take our lips away to take a breath, some air may escape. It's like that. Some of the expansion will go away, but some of it can stay. Let's see if we can just work with that for a minute or two. Just centering our attention on that Dantian point, Hara point. And the whole lower abdomen expanding in all directions around that point. On the exhale, some of it remains. Of course, the mind will tend to drift, even if we're accustomed meditators. It can be hard to keep our attention so precisely centered, but you know what to do. We just keep bringing it back. And gradually, we can invite the feeling that that point is actually performing the inhale for us. And there's a containment to that energy that's gathering, just like the skin of that soccer ball. It expands, but it's also somewhat contained. It can help to notice that practicing in this way, there's a certain feeling that begins to arise. That's rather a pleasant and even somewhat powerful feeling. That's part of the attractive force of the hara is it feels strong and it feels good. It feels centered. It feels grounded to put our attention there. So if you like, you can experiment with giving the attention a little bit of oomph. I don't know quite else how to express it other than we give it a little extra push or energy, a little oomph. We'll just leave us for a couple of minutes to practice with that, and we'll have a chance to ask a few questions. See if you can notice in that centeredness, there's a certain feeling of personal strength or power. This Dantian or horror point is said to raise our chi, to raise our life force by working with it in this way. Perhaps you can feel that. If there's anything that's particularly troubling you personally, perhaps you can allow that feeling to be drawn into the heart on the inhale. And then on the exhale, allow it to just be released. You're not trying to get rid of it. This is kind of a way of processing. Feel it connect with that groundedness and centeredness. And then on the exhale, see if some of it wants to let go. Just take a minute or two more with this. And I'll invite us all back to regular Zoom consciousness. It strikes me that before we move on, it would be good to have an opportunity for questions. Hear anything about how that went for people, questions or comments. I can't see everyone at the same time on the screen. So we might just have to do it popcorn style. Or Jeff, would you rather track it and see if anyone's got hands raised? Can you?
Yeah, I can help with that, Tetsudo.
Yeah.
And I can see everybody on my screen. And
Oh, good, good.
there's also an electronic hand under react or reactions down at the bottom.
Yeah. Yeah, would anyone like to ask any questions about that or comment about it? I know it's incredibly nerdy and precise, and uh, there's something that we could easily find a little maddening about it, but hopefully it's also st encouraging, centering, strengthening those things. Kat, I saw you had your hand raised.
Hi. Um, that was very centering and calming. That's the first time I've done that kind of meditation. And I just had a question since you were so precise about the location of the hara. Could you spell that for me, actually?
Yeah, HARA.
Okay, that's what I thought I was hearing. Okay. So my question is it kind of between the chakras of Svadhisthana and Manipura? Is it like right in between there?
It's meant to be the second chakra,
Oh, it
or
is.
that's what people are mostly correlated to in the Indian system.
Okay.
But they're overlapping systems, but they're not the same. In the Indian system has seven chakras, and the Chinese system has three primary chakras and a lot of secondary ones. But the hara is the first one in that system. Then there's the heart and the third eye are
Okay.
the primary ones. Although there are the palms of the hand, the bottoms of the feet also have chakras, lesser chakras. But
Thank you.
I would say if you're familiar with the chakras, experiment for yourself how they correlate. And yeah, I'd be interested to know. uh,
Yeah.
People can always contact me at Sage Institute if you go to sagetaos.com.Sean. Um, you can always leave a email there.
Thank you.
If you just look up Sage Institute, there's lots of Sage Institutes, but there's only one Sage Taos, so you can always find it.
Got it. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
thanks. John, you had a question or comment? John Service, I see a hand up.
Yes. Hi, thank you. That was really nice. I really I enjoyed the relaxation I felt there. I've been dealing with that area as I breathe, and I was focusing a lot on it, but not in the way that we just did. So it was very interesting to have that description and focus. So I'll definitely be exploring that more.
Mm,
It did remind me of uh something I had also read about and found quite interesting, which was the Tibetan breathing mechanism or trumo, with the focus on the heat in that same area.
mm.
And it made me think of that when you were talking. Is that somehow related to the same concept?
I
Same
believe
idea?
it is. Yeah, I believe it is. I'm not.
Mhm.
I'm somewhat conversant with the Tibetan systems, but not. I'm no expert. So my understanding is that yeah, there are Tibetan practices that, particularly that generate heat, that certainly use that lower abdomen area. Yeah.
Oh, great. So
Yeah.
we could maybe also visualize that as well as we're
Mm,
doing the same exercise that we were just going through. Interesting.
sure. Uh, yeah. I had practiced for years with Ahara, and it worked as a practice, but really being able to get precise about it and find that exact center of it and kind of the more exact location um, really added something to the practice. Yeah,
Excellent. Great. Thanks so much. Thanks for sharing.
sure. Anyone else? Is anyone confused by it or want to take issue with it? Rosette? Oh, you're muted.
Were you speaking to me? I don't know. I'm
Yes, it
confused.
was.
This is completely new to this type of practice is completely new to me. Thank you very much.
Sure.
And so, is there any way of sort of doing it again? Will it be online that we can follow it?
Uh, I have a recording of it that I'd be happy to share with showing or what's the best way to if people wanted me to share that recording with them, I'd be happy to do it. What's the best way for them to request that? Would it be through you, or should they just go to the Sage Institute site?
Yeah, I would say just go to Sage Institute if it's hosted there.
It's not posted there, but you can send an email message, and I'll follow up and send you the recording of it.
Yeah, that's probably better to go directly rather than triangulate.
Okay, sure. Yeah, it's
And,
Institute-sagetaos.com.
and so everyone knows this session is being recorded now as well, and it'll be posted at zenpeacemakers.org probably by Monday or Tuesday.
So you could always go back to this recording as well, of
Yes,
course. Yeah.
yes.
Let's see. Jacqueline had.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure.
I just had the same question, so it's been answered. Thank you.
Okay, good, good. Yes. Yeah, please do contact me at the website, and you can, if you want to sign up for our newsletter, you can sign up for our newsletter and find out other things we're doing there too. But I'd be happy to share my recording of it. Oh, David.
Thank you very much. This is just a comment. I'm slowly, very slowly learning to play the Japanese shakuhachi flute.
Mm.
And it amazes me when I forget about breathing in this way, how more difficult it is to play this flute. And the sound is weaker. The sound is flimsy almost sometimes. But
Interesting.
when I remember
Mhm.
and go down into that and breathe from there, the contrast and the fluidity of breath moving with the sound through the flute is, to me, just amazing.
Yep. Of course, abdominal breathing overall is very helpful with wind instruments, with singing, or with doing the chants that we do in Zen. It adds great strength to that. Had you, David, run across that precise way before of working with it? Yeah, there
No.
are somewhat similar practices I've run across from Rinzai Zen of kind of drawing the energy in there and containing it, but I'd never run across that finding the precise center point except through the Taoist approach.
Yeah. No, thank you. This was much more
Great.
focused.
Let's see, maybe one more question, then we'll move along. Jen?
Yes, I have practiced a kind of Qigong meditation that was developed by an oncologist in China to build up your immune system by breathing into the Dantian point.
Yeah.
So I wonder about bringing any kind of negative energy, fear energy, conflict energy into that point. And even if you're releasing it, it seems like the whole idea of the kind of Qigong practice that I do is to build up positive energy in that part of the body in order to be able to withstand disease.
Yeah, it's true. That is part of how it's used. And always I say for experienced practitioners, you need to check with your own practice and do what works for you. So that's definitely a known practice to let the positive energy that accumulates in the hara to allow it to transform negative energies. In that it's, if we're practicing, especially in retreat practice, we can build up so much positive energy that I've definitely worked that way with dissolving energies that felt negative. Of course, there is no negative or positive energy ultimately, right? It's in how humans perceive it, and also obviously in the treatment of disease and such, there are negative and positive energies. But in the universe, energy switches from one form to another all the time without second thought. So some of these energetic practices are meant to work the same way, that the energy can just shift. But I would experiment for yourself. And if you have health issues, sure, keep it all 100% positive. Well, do what seems right for your practice, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's also setting koan practice that you could place the koan in the hara and breathe from, breathe through the koan in that way. But it's also can be done with life problems. There are genjo koans, everyday problems that just let it rest there. There's been recent research that has found that there are brain-like neurons actually in the abdominal area and as well as in the heart area. So when we say, I had a gut level sense of so and so, that's an actual thing. There's a form of cognition happening. And when we say, I followed my heart, it's a very similar thing. There's some cognition happening in both those areas as well as up here. John, did you have one more thing? John, I see.
Yes, just to add on to it with that same discussion point. I remember reading a great book by Norman Fisher about the practice of sending and receiving, where we breathe in the negative feelings and then we filter them through our breathing cycle and then put out the positive energy through that. So when you were saying that, as you were describing it, that's what I was sort of interpreting.
It's somewhat similar to a Tonglen practice. The other thing, the way it's often done with, it's not exactly a Tonglen practice, but a modified Tonglen practice, which comes from the Tibetan. A more direct way to do it is to breathe the so-called negative energies into the heart on the inhale, and then exhale pure positivity. So the way that's meant to work is we allow the energy that we think of as negative to transform to positivity, and then we give it away. Yeah.
Right.
That's kind of a discussion probably for another time, unless we end up with time at the end, in which case I had thought of doing exactly that practice, but we'll see how we go.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I want to change gears somewhat because there's the question of dealing with our own centeredness, groundedness with our own practice, with our own clarity, so that we know what to do, so that we know how to act in difficult times. And I think that many of us are rather baffled by what to do. We're experiencing unprecedented divisions and unprecedented actions being taken by certain people in the country and in the world that are just feel like they're beyond us, and it's important that we keep ourselves centered and balanced, and that we give ourselves that time. There was a very wise person who worked as an astrologer who lived in Taos. His name was Joseph the Star Watcher, and he had a astrology reading every day on the radio, and everybody in town knew it and read it. And I'm not sharing anything that isn't widely known here. He died some years ago now, and after he died, I'd met him, and he certainly was a person of wisdom and depth, and understood consciousness in a deep way. Whether or not you go with astrology doesn't really matter. He was somebody who used that method to open up his own wisdom. And but his wife did some interviews after he died, and she said that he died in utter despair, and because he was so concerned. He died a few short years after 9/11, and she said the invasion of Iraq and everything that followed that it so disturbed him and so distressed him that he felt like the human race was going down the tubes. Anyone ever feel that way? And we probably all have wondered that sometimes in recent times. But it so consumed him that he died in despair. And I think what a shame, because as wise and as compassionate a person as we can be, we can let these things overtake us, and then we're not only does it affect our life and the life of everyone around us, but it tends to render us incapable of doing anything constructive to help. And so So we, like Gary Snyder said in the quote at the beginning, we need to look into the self and deal with our practice on that level, and then there's some obligation to the greater good. So I was at the monastery, Zen Mountain Monastery, which is in uh, it's in the Catskills near Woodstock, and I was teaching a writing workshop there with Natalie Goldberg. I was assisting her teaching a writing workshop there in October, right after 9/11, and so it was right in the midst of all that turmoil, and we had people writing on the group who had been very close or had lost someone or had seen the events or had gotten out of the building. We had all of that. Um, and I had already been listening to these dialogues that Daido Roshi and Miyotai Sensei were having with the Sangha pretty much immediately after it happened. I think they called the first Sangha meeting at noon on the day of September 11th. And I thought back upon those times because uh, in giving talks recently for almost the last 10 years, I am dealing with a lot of people who were very upset and stirred up with the turmoil uh, in our country and in the world, and I am as well definitely affected by it. My transmission teacher, the teacher I finished my training with, Jerry Shishinwick Roshi, he and I were back when all this started, which was about 10 years ago, the 2016 election. I'm not going to get political here, but I'm not going to get too political. Uh, but um, he and I were having a lot of conversations about it, and he said something that always struck me. He said, "I choose to let myself be upset by these things," and I thought I've often thought back upon that because it is possible to use one's practice, to misuse one's practice to wall off the world. And there may be times, especially early in practice, where we more or less need to forget about outside events and just devote ourselves to that. But our practice won't go very far if we stay there. You know, it becomes kind of a hideout, you know. And it just struck me that that's a good attitude to have in my own balance is let enough of it in that I stay upset enough to be motivated, but not so upset that it sinks my boat, you know. And that's more or less the way I've been practicing with all these things since. But I want to share some of these words. So I went back because after years of this kind of turmoil, I've sometimes felt at a loss of what to say in Dharma talks to deal with it. And I recall thinking back to 9/11 that the Mountain Record, which is the then Mountain Monastery's magazine publication, that I probably had one in storage somewhere that was from that time. And sure enough, I looked for it and I had it. And I found it very inspiring to look back on the words of how they dealt with it. So I want to share some of this with you. I hope you'll find it inspirational too. And just as a teacher, I find it I'm quite impressed with the way that Daido Miyotai's practice, years of practice, showed up in how they dealt with the Sangha, because they were deeply upset and by the events, and yet they stayed centered. They stayed grounded and centered, which is um, even in the midst of that. So this uh, these are the remarks at noon on the day it happened. This is Daido. Um, this is a time that fiercely reminds us of a few stark truths. There is no resting ground. There is nothing to rely upon. Not knowing is, after all, most real. We feel now the urgency of our practice of responding to the world with wisdom and compassion, and yet this time is rife with confusion. How do we take this up? How do we respond? We must offer each other our raw humanity as practitioners, letting our vow to awaken turn our despair into spiritual fire. That's something. That's quite a phrase, to let our vows to awaken, turn our despair into spiritual fire. Somehow practicing together makes it possible to open to what feels impenetrable, to live and love in the face of what we cannot bear, to respond to what seems beyond our capacity. As the immediacy of this time fades, let us keep returning to the vital lessons. If we don't transform the world, who will do it? So a little bit more from that. The fallout from these events is going to reverberate around the world for a long time. It's karma, right? What's happening in our country, especially in our country right now, is going to affect things for decades to come. So for most of us, this is something that's beyond anything we've ever experienced before. Oh yeah, I think so. As spiritual practitioners, this is what we train for. This is what our practice is about. What can we do? We need to do what we always do, create a sanctuary of peace, nourishment, and calm. Remember your zazen. Remember the still point in your heart. Do what you need to do when you're asked to, but do it in a way that's peaceful and centered. I have no idea what we'll be called upon to do, but whatever it is, I want to be able to respond with people who are calm, efficient, and ready to serve. Let Zazen be your reference point. Of course, to me, this relates directly to a lot of the work of Zen peacemakers, is going into impossible situations like homelessness, like like Auschwitz, and bringing that calm and centeredness and that poise and power of practice into those settings. Let's hope that wisdom and compassion will prevail. It's there in all of us. He's talking here about President Bush, and I'll leave it at talking about President Bush, and we can extrapolate as we will. Let's hope wisdom and compassion will prevail. It's there in all of us, President Bush included. There's a Buddha buried in all of us. Let's hope that this tragedy brings that Buddha to life, so this doesn't get any worse than it is. That's from Dido, and I want to share some of what Leotai said. We have the capacity to face our grief. How many ways can compassion be expressed at this point? In a sense, that's always the question for a practitioner of this path. The vigor and intelligence we bring to these questions will make all the difference. To a very large extent, many of us may conclude that the situation is too complex and too hopeless. We'll settle for, I just work on whatever measure of happiness, whatever small, meager amount of kindness I can affect. We don't often say, I'd like to change the way this government is happening. I'd like to change the way water and air are treated, the way food and electricity are distributed on the face of the earth. What is that in the midst of this grief right now? Those questions can seem almost abstract and political. But is the spiritual response different from the political response, from political revolution? Dido Roshi comes back and says, people often don't seem to be serious about human existence in this country, as if what's going on in the rest of the world is just put out of their mind. I hope these events really wake us up like a slap in the face, and that we get serious, that we look at the whole world and see the suffering, that we stop seeing everything through the filter of our own egos, where everything revolves around us. And Myotai talks about anger. Anger arises and it needs to be practiced. We need to acknowledge it, not deny it or try to look angelic and enlightened. Our charge is to be real and work with what's real by feeling it, but by letting go of the ideas that come up in relation to it. And I'll close with a few more words from Myotai that, and I'll close this part of our talk with a few more words from Myotai. I haven't talked to anyone lately who hasn't wondered, should I go to Maine, Canada, New Zealand? Where is the safe spot? If we give attention to that, however, we realize that we are impermanent. We're all going to die. This body will die. We don't know when, we don't know where, we don't know how. What we do know is that we're responsible for what we create in this moment and that we have many choices. It's important to forgive ourselves these forays into wondering how to build a bomb shelter in our apartments or how to find a place that will survive all threats. But there is no place to hide. That's the rawness we're encountering, perhaps for the first time in our history, in a visceral way. If things move in the direction of the worst possibilities, all that's left to us is the choice between love and fear. I'll confess that over the first days I had the passing thought, well, I could go teach in New Zealand. But then I realized I'd have to get a boat large enough to take everybody I love with me. And by that time, I would have to build a world-sized boat. So I might as well stay put. So part of what we work with in our practice is letting go of our thoughts and returning to our direct experience again and again. That's one way to boil down what meditation is at the bottom. The breath has its own marvelous characteristics, enlivening and relaxing characteristics, but underneath it all, they say there's 1,000 different meditation methods, and what they pretty much all have in common is they involve bringing our attention to our present moment direct experience, whether it's through the breath or another anchor. And when our mind draws us away, our thinking mind draws us away from that experience, we bring our attention back, right? What can begin to happen is, as we let go of thoughts again and again, and by the way I was trained is that when we get caught in thoughts, to give the thought a moment's acknowledgement so it knows it's received, so we see what we've been thinking, and then we return our attention to the breath. Sometimes it's said, let go of thoughts. I don't usually give that instruction because people tussle with how do I let go. All we have to do is see the thought and then return the attention elsewhere to the breath or to our other anchor, right? All we have to do. That makes it sound easy, which it isn't, right? But what starts to happen over time is that we believe our thoughts a little less. My Sage Institute motto is, don't believe everything you think, right? Wouldn't it be great if some of the people who are in charge in our world didn't believe everything they think? Of course, as we come into adulthood, if we don't do something to intervene, that's the way it tends to be, right? We tend to have a thought. We think the thought is me. We think I thunk it. And of course, one of the first things we see in meditation is that the thoughts are thinking themselves. I'm not doing it. Of course, it's much like the breath. We can exert some influence and control over the breath. But if we forget about it, the breath will just breathe itself, and that's what it mostly does. And it's the same with the thinking mind. We can certainly have directive, intentional thinking. But most of the time, it's just spitting up the thoughts all by itself. It's not me. In fact, if it was me, how could I turn my attention away from it? uh, to the present moment. It's just one aspect of what's happening in this body, mind, emotional body. So there's a system. I'd love to come back sometime and share this system that I learned from Bernie Glassman. It's a modification of the five skandhas, the five aggregates, and it's a way of working through, of clarifying for ourselves the difference between what's actually happening, what we directly take in through our perceptions, and what our minds add to it, which is where a lot of the suffering comes from. One of the things I say, I've been teaching meditation to university students for 20 years for credit. So the world is changing for the good in some ways. And one of the things I often point out to them is most moments are just fine, aren't they? In fact, if anything, it's pleasant to be alive most moments. Is it pleasant to be alive in this moment? I bet for most of us it is, unless you're actively in pain or grief, and I understand there are times like that. But in general, this is a nice moment. This is the only moment I actually have in reality in my life. And so I'm spending my whole life with you all. You're very nice people to spend my whole life with. I'm grateful. But in reality, that's what we've got, right? And if we look at most moments under our feet, I sometimes ask a class, how many events does it take to make a bad day? And they'll usually say three. Three things happen in the morning and it's a bad day. But what about all those other moments that are just fine in the day? Or the moments where we actually receive kindness or cooperation from people? They're a lot more common than the bad ones. Yes, there are some bad ones, I can't deny it. But it's not by far the greater number of moments are neutral or good. And also, I'll often ask, are there days where nothing bad happens to us? Obviously, there's always something bad happening to someone. But in our life, are there days nothing bad happens? Sure, there's plenty of days like that. But how many days do we not find some reason to suffer? And so when we suffer on a day where nothing bad is actually happening, it behooves us as practitioners to look at what our minds are doing. And it's very, very often the thoughts that are circling in our mind, which are making us suffer emotionally. And very often they're regrets about the past or projections, fear into the future. As Myotai said, when times are bad, sometimes it boils down to us having the choice between love and fear. And it is said that the two things can't coexist at the same time. And I think moment to moment, I actually believe that's true. And that when we get consumed by fear, as we're seeing in this country a lot, because that's where a lot of our problems arise from, right? People are fearful. They're fearful about the ways the country's changing, and they want to stop it. And when that kind of fear takes over, then love tends to go out the window. Right? But I can boil down Bernie's method to three simple points, which is there's the actual event, sensation, perception. Something comes through our sensation, we perceive reality. There's a reaction, we react to it. And then often emotionally, we react to it, or sometimes physically. If there's a loud sound outside, we'll jump up and go to the window, right? And we'll be experiencing, we'll have done that physical action, but we'll also be experienced probably being startled by the sound. And then there's the story that we bring to it, which comes out of our conditioning. And as practitioners, our business is to go back to the original stimulus. You could also call it stimulus, the thing that happens, our perceptions through sensory perception. There's a Viktor Frankl quote that we had a visitor in my Sage Institute class yesterday, and he reminded me of a Viktor Frankl quote that said, between stimulus and response is where our freedom lies. And that's part of what we're practicing. It's practitioners, isn't it? And I'd add to that, between stimulus and response, rather than running to an emotional reaction, sometimes we can just stop and breathe, right? Just center ourselves, use this method we've just been practicing. But then there's another freedom. Even if we get caught in the response, we don't have to run into the whole mental fabrication that gets added to it, right? And the mental fabrications then go back and they re-stimulate the response, the reaction, which then stimulates more thought, which stimulates more reaction. If you ever laid awake at night trying to sort through a problem and gotten nowhere with it, you know exactly what this is like, right? You can't settle, you can't go to sleep. You just get more and more agitated, and you don't end up solving the problem. And then how do you end up solving the problem? You're in the shower next morning, and intuitively you know it needs to be done because it comes from the gut level, you know. And we're trying to solve it up here. I want to leave some time for discussion and questions, right? Because that obviously raises a lot of points. And yeah, perhaps sometime we can do Sean. I can talk about Bernie's method, and we could work with that because it's very valuable to really clarify for ourselves how direct experience, which is pretty simple, right? You know, most direct experience moments, no problem, right? It's what we add to them that very often creates the problem. There's no doubt that sometimes we'll drop a rock on our foot and it hurts, you know, but then we can react to it by getting angry, and then we could start the thinking mind. What does this always happen to me? If there's a rock in the world, I'm going to drop it on my foot. Why are there rocks in the world? Why is the world so hard and our bodies so soft? You know, why are things so difficult? Next thing we know, we're awake all night, right? So it'd be interesting to be able to go in through all those steps with you all sometime. Yeah. So any questions, comments, complaints? Sean takes the complaints. I don't take them.
Yeah, I'll handle the complaints. That's yeah.
Comments are fine too. We don't have to have questions. I mean, I feel like what Dido and Miotai said is pretty thorough. I don't know what we have to ask about, but we might have responses.
You know what occurs to me, Sean, as you're talking about this, that whole vertical shelf right there is Zen books.
Mm.
And we can get so wrapped around the axle, but it is just breathtakingly simple, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everything we need in this practice, you've just described, and it's a lifetime's worth, and it's just, you know, unbelievably simple.
It's and at the same time quite difficult.
And the most difficult thing we'll ever do, probably.
Edie has a question. Or a comment? Am I pronouncing your name right? You're muted. You're left on mute.
Okay. Yes. I guess it had to have been in a movie, a scene in a movie, and it has always stuck with me. It was in sometime in Japan, time of the samurai, or a long time ago, and it was a room, and it would be equivalent to now a teacher and students and pupils. All dressed in their amazing garb from that era, maybe they were a little, I don't know, military student, I don't know. But the thing is, there was this great turmoil, and it was an invasion, and it was imminent. And then you could even see through the sort of door to the side, a sort of clashing, that was absolutely going to come their way. And I don't know if they startled a little bit and started sort of instinctively kind of moving away, but their teacher indicated that they go into a state of, you could say, repose. They were in a classic state of meditation. And then, they were all killed. I think those forces came in and they were all killed. But I just thought that was kind of amazing, because it's possible. You see these wonderful nuns who immolate themselves and don't even move, apparently. And this is an extreme thing. I'm sorry about the times we're going through now. It is. It's very extreme. But it definitely stayed with me, because that's sort of something to emulate, in a way, that steadfastness in spite of anything, in spite of impending death.
We
Yeah.
have the means we have the practice. Practice gives us the means to deal with what we're facing.
Yeah.
Although we can't control the outcome or what we'll have to do or what we'll have to face, but we can, even if the world was going to end next week, wouldn't it be a shame
Yeah.
not for us to go out in despair instead of in appreciating the glory and beauty and goodness that is here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you, Didi.
Mm-hmm.
Jen had a question or comment.
Yeah, I'm trying to kind of reconcile. Earlier today, you talked about, like, we don't want it to all go to neutrality and kind of disconnect with what's happening. And then the whole concept of the response. But sometimes, and this is a conflict that I've had within the Zen Peacemaker community and discussions about things that are happening in the world. I think anger is fine. I think the response of being angry and taking action and standing up for things and having opinions. And yet what I get sometimes is a teaching of, like, well, that's your response, so you need to kind of, find this other place, what you call freedom, in between the stimulus and the response. And I just say, wait a minute. I don't understand that. It's like the whole kind of bearing witness and then somehow kind of being neutral about the horror that's around us. And part of what I know, this is like a jumble, and we don't really have a lot of time for this, but it's a conflict in what I've had with teachers, that neutrality comes from such a place of privilege.
For sure.
And so if you can meditate instead of, being bombed, you're in a very privileged kind of place. So anyway, I'm not being very clear about this, but.
No, I understand. I'll go back to Miyotai's. I actually cut one of Miyotai's comments off a little bit. I'll read it more fully. She says, anger arises and it needs to be practiced. We need to acknowledge it, not deny it or try to be angelic and look enlightened. Our charge is to be real and to work with what's real by feeling it and by letting go of the ideas that come up around it. So this is the way we practice, not to let ourselves wall ourselves off. She says, in one sense, anger is wisdom. If we take ourselves out of the equation and drop the illusion of separation, then our anger is nothing but life wanting to take care of life. But when we add even a hint of separation, then we're faced with someone else or something other that we want to eradicate. So it's, anger can be powerful fuel for action, and we certainly shouldn't deny it. Or we shouldn't. I mean, we need to be true to what is actual in practice. We if we're actually feeling anger, then we actually feel it and practice with it. And it's not to be denied. It's a form of energy. But we also know how anger can consume us. We see this in the governments and in wars. So our business is to feel that energy, but not get caught up in all these ideas about who we need to attack angrily, or who we might start to hate, or who we might be to blame for all this. And I mean, the truth is, we're all to blame. Those of us who've lived in privilege without quite realizing it, the immense privilege we have. I think a lot of us are waking up to that now. That's the one of the things Dido was talking about is we hope this comes like a slap in the face to wake us up. And I definitely feel angry about what's happening. I definitely do. And yet I can't just live in that place. You know, it would eat me up, you know. So I have to let that in, let myself feel it, not get carried away with the thoughts that attend the anger, um, not give way to hatred, certainly. Um, it's a temptation. It's a temptation even for me after years of practice. I could find people to hate. I'm just not going there, you know, because then they win, you know. Then those forces win if they make us, if we become like them, you know.
But
But
there's something I think that happened, at least my experience, sometimes in the Zen peacemaker world, I'm referring to that, is like it's rude to kind of call things out.
mm,
And
mm,
so I have a lot of problem with that.
yeah,
Situations where I felt like the appropriate thing to do was to call out what was happening, but the teaching was one shall never call out, you
mhm,
know, and within this circle. And so I really struggle with that a lot. It's
yeah,
not about wanting to be mean to people. It's just like if you see things that are clearly like not okay.
yeah, yeah,
And would you say, well, that's just your opinion? But I mean, I think some things are like clearly not okay. And whether that's my opinion or not, I think
yeah.
to, let's all sit back and meditate and not be rude feels to me like something that happens within this community.
mhm.
Is my
I,
personal experience
yeah.
with it.
I can't speak to the rules of the community and how it's every community faces this issue to some degree, and every community has a different set of norms around it. Sharon, you want to speak to that? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Jan, for that because uh, uh, I I don't think that's actually a rule. I'm fairly involved in Zen peacemakers, and I don't consider that a rule at all. In fact, the the third tenet, the three tenets go together, and as you're describing, the first one not knowing, the second one bearing witness, those are very still, those are very passive. But there is a third one, and that is stand up and go do something. And it could be stand up and go say something. And we don't tend to get into prescribing what it is anybody ought to do because it's a very personal reaction to bearing witness to the world and the suffering and the injustice and indignities of the world from that still place, that everybody reacts in a different way. And I'd be the first one to say, however you're called to react, that's very personal, and I respect that. But I know what you're talking about too, Jan. I there is that perception, and perhaps that even gets said sometimes too. But I wanted to clarify that a little bit. I hope that helps.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, I think to me the basic way we handle it in Sage Institute is we can still approach conflict and disagreement with kindness, with fundamental kindness and compassion, and um, those things shouldn't take over the work that we're doing. And I've seen sanghas torn apart by issues of calling out and such because they can take over the whole thing if they so. I think every practice community and probably each of us individually has to deal with those issues um, in the way that seems sensible and to who we are and what moment it is. Kat, I wanted to get to you. Make sure we hear from you.
Thank you. This is really quick. Could you please repeat Dido's quote was it from the newsletter from Zen Mountain Monastery about let our vows to awaken?
Yeah, yeah, it's quite quite the inspiring quote, isn't it? Those of us who know Dido knows that he could summon a lot of gravitas. Uh, he says, we offer each other our raw humanity as practitioners, letting our vow to awaken turn our despair into spiritual fire.
Thank you so much.
Turn our anger into spiritual fire, too. Yeah, maybe turn all our emotions and unsettledness. John, you had something you want to share?
Yeah. I was thinking back to the beginning points you were making about the reality that existed in the early time, or the fall of the Tang Dynasty, or Buddha was facing. And, you know, it's kind of like, if we do really accept that the world isn't permanent, that nothing stays the same, and we are trying the impossible to save all sentient beings and all life from suffering, it's an impossible task. We have already accepted that it will always be dealing with these same forces and elements in just different ways. There are different levels of intensity. And maybe what's happened is the world has kind of gone through a cycle. We're kind of in the extreme end of that cycle because of complacency, or being in a bubble, or not being connected to the actual reality fully. And then now we're going through a process of more spiritual awakening and understanding that will maybe push things back into a better balance. And so it kind of then leads us that question of action. What action do we take? And I really do think people are saying you have to find what you can do in your world to move that kind of, the ledger of good towards a little bit more of that balance. And we can get it around the red into the positive, so to speak. And by focusing on that, we're giving ourselves a sense of purpose and away from the despair, and also practicing our faith, our spirituality and our faith. So I was thinking of that when you were talking about, because I think we kind of feel that why is this happening? This is the wrong direction. This is the wrong thing. Actually, I think it's just the way it's always been in different ways. Or we were in bubbles that were not real, and now they popped, and now we're facing that reality. So, yeah.
Thank
Good
you.
reflections. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I know a lot of us are at a loss for what to do, or we may not be in a position to do very much. We may not know what to do. At the least, we can use our privilege to donate. And I really encourage us to donate to organizations like the ACLU, like Zen Peacemakers, like the Red Cross and Mercy Corps, and climate change, um, climate change organizations, the World Wildlife Fund, and things like that. Um, and we can probably all do some of that. Jacqueline, yeah, did you have something?
Yes, I've done a lot of thinking about the thing of anger, because I go there quite readily. And what I've discovered is that it's really important to acknowledge my anger, but it's just one more emotion. And it's so easy to get stuck onto any of the emotions. And as activists, getting stuck on the anger piece, it turns from a asset to a deficit when I get attached to it.
Yeah.
And then I start blaming people, and then I start getting like anger everywhere.
Hmm.
So I think it's just one more thing that we experience, and it it it's a problem when it gets blown up like any other of the emotions or
For sure.
feelings.
Yeah, and like Myoto says, when you add I to the anger, the Buddhist teachings are anger arises because of causes and conditions. There's no self behind it. When we attach the self to it, then I am angry, I am outraged. I want, I want some satisfaction from this, and anger to me is maybe the toughest one there, because there's something that happens when our body gets flooded with all that adrenaline, that we tend to feel we're justified, and And maybe we're justified in feeling what we're feeling, but but we're not necessarily justified in the actions that leads to. That's where, that's the other place we have freedom. We might run all the way through the chain of something happens, we have a reaction to it, we generate thoughts about it, but there's still freedom before action. Before the way we act, and do we inflict our anger? Uh, and I really admire these people who go into conflict zones and mediate between opposing parties who sometimes hate each other, and how do they not get caught up in it, swept in it? It must be very similar to the way we practice, stay centered, grounded, in the moment. I don't know. David raised his hand. Do we have time for one more, Sean, or should we go to a close?
We're over time, but David, if it's really brief.
Yeah, it's very brief. Thank you. In Zen practice, there's sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Desires are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. I could never be comfortable with desires are inexhaustible. For me, I vow to meet them. Mm-hmm. The mindfulness of acknowledging and then working with it in one form or another. And I think for me, it's made quite a difference because, and again, I'm sure there are different ways that different people in their practice have phrased this. But I appreciate what you were saying earlier about being mindful, meeting whatever the feeling is, to meet it.
Yeah, exactly. And then you know what to do. Sometimes it's okay to follow desire. You want an ice cream, no harm, So, and then sometimes you'll look at the desire and you go, oh, I feel it, but I'm not going to do it. Thank you all for coming. It's such a pleasure to spend time with you all.